Hello, and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are continuing our discussion on the poetry collection Thrown in the Throat by Benjamin Garcia. Today we will be discussing some of our favorite pieces and lines in the first half of the collection.
Cool. Well, welcome back to the Literally Literary. We are finally going to start getting into the nitty gritty and the deep in the weeds with Benjamin's book.
Deep into something.
This is a book that like I said, we wanted to talk about since last year. So I'm happy that we're going to give it its due justice. Or we'll try our best to give it its due justice, I should say. But I hope all y'all out there are doing good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
I'm doing quite well, my chap.
All right. Yeah. Just want to have that in there just in case people think I'm keeping you guys hostage or something.
They can't see me blink twice if I'm in danger anyway.
True.
And what if I did answer like, I'm not okay? I'm not okay.
True.
Then it might have been a very different episode.
That's true.
But here we are.
It is pre-recorded, so...
There's a drastic cut. And then, all right, we're back.
All right. Let's get things started. I think we all wanted something to say about the language in question, not just because it's a poem that is a recurring title throughout the collection and kind of a work that, almost divides the work right up into its own areas, even though, as we mentioned, there's no sections. But it's interesting for me how this first time we see it, I had mentioned last time, right, the double slash. So it's one thing we see from the very beginning.
Caesura, right?
It's what it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Caesura is like the break in a line.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of lines, what were the strong lines of the...
That was a great transition.
Of the language in question for you all? The poem in question...
I didn't really have like a specific strong line for this one. I just felt like there was several that just tie it all together. To me, I interpreted this poem meaning like the language in question is actually like American culture, I think, and like the dark side of American culture.
What makes you say that? That's interesting.
I got it from like the moving west and like I thought of like colonization and then talks about Billy the Kid and then drug use.
It's almost like you're taking a Western lit course right now.
Right? It's interesting how it's manifesting in that reading.
Yeah. Interesting.
You're manifesting destiny there. But.
Well, let's talk about the language in question. One of the things that I to me pick up right away is that, and I did say this the previous episode, but this is poetry that you can not only read on page, but you can also perform on the stage, because there are very much rhythmic qualities to it. And his use of caesura definitely highlights his intention. And he does it all throughout the collection. Very interesting uses of these breaks within the line. Because often, and we see it more often in modern poetry, because I think it's not needed as often. People just kind of use the end of the line as the break. In this case, he's creating caesuras to have these stoppages, which creates very interesting images. And so it's very imagistic right away, right off the bat. You see his wordplay. He, and this is his strength throughout the book, I think, is kind of building an image and transforming it or adding to it in some way or transforming it in some way. And a lot of times it's very visual, and sometimes it's a pun on words, introducing something else. So, for example, like a shark ate a license plate, and it ate the shark. With its fins it poached anyway. It gorges like a gorge. So it gorges like a gorge is one of his first instances where he's kind of playing around with homophones, right? and also of course meanings. And I highlighted throughout the poem some of his prosody. I'm a big fan of prosody because I always tell people, poetry, and I always hesitate to make an absolute statement, right? But I always love it when poetry is like music. It is. It should be, and so prosody are definitely the most common musical elements in poetry, like alliteration and assonance. So those are the repetition of sounds. And so let's say midway through the poem, he so for example, warm, and this isn't even like any of those, but I like how he goes from warm tongue ORM to warm WARM in a span, and he does this in various instances throughout the collection. So I like how this poem is like the setup because it kind of shows off his style, which is very distinct from a lot of the other collections we've read. But going back to the prosody, right? So you have the O sounds there, orm, 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 orm. And then he goes to the O sound, scrolls, codices, tomes, entombs, embalms, bombs. And later on, he gets to kind of the S sounds, salve, savage, and sage. And I think this is a really fun one to read out loud. Yes, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the way you're describing it and just seeing it again, it's very much like a tongue twister, right? Which is kind of interesting because literally there's the tongue, right, that is twisted in the poem. And again, it goes back to what you're saying, right? That, just like Patty had said in her reading that, it's about tasting the words in your mouth, right? And the way that your tongue twists when you say it. So yeah, I think you really hit it on the nail on the head there.
And also, he doesn't do it here, but this is very bilingual. The collection. You see a lot of Spanish as well and Spanglish, but you don't see it here as much. But I think to kind of go off your tongue twisting and playing with that, I think it's interesting though how he mimics Spanish at the end.
Yeah.
Adios, amigos. So to kind of even go with Vanessa's like kind of Western expansion kind of theme, it's he's kind of playing around with that. I think that's the only Spanish in this section.
I think so too. And again, the image of the tongue, because the tongue to the speaker is the place where the language comes from, which I think is makes it much more central, right? And hence the emphasis there on like, I bet it's kinky and likes to be tied, likes every bit of itself bit, right? Going back to the wordplay you're talking about. Yeah, that's a really strong opening poem. And then the next poem, Warrior Song, is the poem that we had talked about last time, is in the book jacket. So this one, kind of reminded me of a little bit of like those political anthems like Rage Against the Machine, like People of the Sun. And so that's, the title and the we, right? The speaker uses the we voice here. And this one is speaking about undocumented as well, right? And so undocumented is our status. Resistance is our cause. Because we cannot sleep, we dream with open eyes. The references there to dreamers as well, I think. So I like this one because of that. I think it's always nice to get these kinds of anthem like poems. And the anaphoras, right, of when we had no, in that second stanza, and going on to the other ones,
the followings,
yeah, our passport, our blood was our passport. I really like that line.
I mean, he's working with these elements of things that they do not have and how they respond to it. We didn't have this, so we had this. We didn't have this, we had this. Kind of making it happen, and I get why this was chosen as a poem to represent on the inside jacket.
Mm-hmm.
But that last stanza is what I highlighted as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the first line. I know so many of the books and poem collections that we have discussed so far on this show. One of the common themes is immigration, but through intergenerational lenses, and so something that always comes up is sacrifice. And so the very first line of this poem, right, brings that up again. When our mothers had no water for themselves, we drank. It's kind of one of those elements of, well, make sure that he, whoever, right, the youth, whoever the speakers are here, the we, being taken care of by their parents or their older generation.
Mm-hmm. And, it's referenced again in the third to last stanza where it says, when we had no direction, our family was our compass. It does remind me that of, like you said, right, a lot of those intergenerational works from Sabrina and Karina to, Some Are Always Hungry. I think so. There's the way that Benjamin plays around with language, the way that he brings in politics here, and then in the third poem, Averting the Gaze, which I don't know if you all had, but I think it's a very important poem when it comes to the speaker's gay identity, and so what did you guys think of this one?
Okay. So the title right away took me back to a moment in grad school where I don't think we had this class together, where sometimes he was just older, so I think a lot of the newer acceptance of things like sexual identity weren't quite there for him yet, and so a lot of his commentary and passages and readings would confuse him. Sometimes he would unintentionally kind of say demeaning things, about identity, sexual identity, and and so at that point, I do remember most of us were kind of already like expecting something. This is a really big lead up for probably nothing, but his presentation was talking about the gaze, the GAZE, right? As a concept, right, and within the text. But of course, one of my really good friends that I had almost all grad school classes with, she was already starting to kind of respond negatively to him because she imagined the gaze, GAYS, right? Averting the gaze. And so, she identifies as gay. And so she kind of started like getting upset.
Yeah.
And that confusion is definitely, I think, intentional in this title. Because we're trying to bring up this concept of his identity and not just his mother's. Does he bring up his mother? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And just kind of the society's refusal to accept it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but totally makes sense. Vanessa, what did you think? Like any lines in particular that kind of jumped out at you, or?
Well, I think in the second line, just his mom chose not to see. Like, it wasn't that she didn't know; it was that she like averted her gaze. And then I also really liked the towards the end of the poem, "People don't stop being people." Like it doesn't change who he is because of who he's interested in.
Yeah, put that on his shirt. Yeah, I really like the follow up to that. The line right after, because it's kind of one of the first instances of a visual pun. Right, people don't stop being people, like the eyes at the end of Pompeii. So if you look like an eye, it's kind of like a little stick figure, right, with the little head as a dot, and then the figure. Like, okay, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. And then again, we get the tongues there right at the end, all on their own tongues, do things without us when we aren't looking. And I like that image there at the end of the least of which is holding hands, which reminds me of, as you probably remember, right, Chico's infamous Chico's incident. I don't know if you remember about it, Vanessa, when there was a gay couple holding hands and people made big hoopla about it, like it was all over the radio.
Scene.
And it was one of those instances of like, where that social contract is broken because people don't accept people for who they are, right? They're
God, they held hands. Oh no.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I remember that debate and being really disappointed, I guess, and the general public.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that. Why? Well, I'm okay, but don't push it in my face, right? But you think of like every single TV show or movie, you have the heterosexual couples, like, yeah, holding hands is the least of the thing, but that's all they could do, you know, waiting in line in Chicos, hold hands and get criticized for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to that machista culture that we talked about way back with, Ben Science's work,
Yeah.
and how there's that scene at the bridge, where like they couldn't hold hands.
Yeah.
Right? Remember? What was the next one y'all had?
Oh man.
I have the hurricane.
I just have one line in that same one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's like towards the end.
Okay, mine. So I have the hurricane is page 5, and to me the beginning, I going back to how the speaker is creating this identity throughout the collection. It opens with Garcia is my common name, but you can call me by my suborder, ver mi lengua, because my tongue worms into pockets. ¿Quieres ver mi lengua? If you want to keep America, America, better bolt it down or lock it. Ahí vamos. And so there's a lot here, about going back to family, going back to what you said, Vanessa, right, about the westernization and western expansion, and what is America, right? Is it a country of immigrants or what have you? Does it really accept everyone, etc.? And I like how the speaker here takes that name and then again brings it the sensuality, right? The tongue, ver mi lengua. It goes back to, this is where my identity comes from, right? This is how you can hear me. So that was what jumped out at me.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of go off of that opening stanza you're referring to, one thing you see again, not just in this one but throughout, is his voice is very I want to say confrontational, but it's very, like, I guess maybe sassy is the word. Where he's being very confrontational to certain types of readers. Right, and you kind of see it here, right? Oh, if you want to keep America, America, you better bolt it up and lock it up, which is very sardonic, but like, all right, here we come. Deal with it, pretty much.
Yeah. And, throughout this collection from the very first one, we get a lot of different animals, right? Like there's an octopus later on, different birds. Here, there's an anteater. And, so this idea of an anteater isn't afraid of a cage. And the cage takes on a different meaning at the end of the page where it says, but there's enough for everyone. Remember, there is no cage. You cannot leave. The joke: why do Mexicans wear pointy boots? To get the roaches in the corners. Brings to mind, of course, that whole immigration scene, right, of immigrants in cages, which unfortunately we still see to this day, right? And it's something that obviously does not stop with one administration. But I like how kind of like Gris does, takes these poems from like a more natural setting to the political one.
Yeah. Even the reference to delousing there towards the end recalls immigration practices.
Right.
We can think back again to spraying chemicals on people.
Right. Yeah, the Carmelita Torres, the DM.
That's right.
Yeah. And Vanessa, what did you want to point out about this one?
Like, it's basically like the last line. It's in italics and it says, but where is your family really from? What's your native tongue? And I think that that's something that, like, especially growing up here, like, I've heard other people have it said to them, or like when I go out of town, or like at different conferences, like that's a common thing that happens.
Right. The microaggressions, right? I feel like we've talked about that in a certain work. I just can't remember.
totally. It has to be several.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then even then, right? Your answer would not satisfy, because then you might say like, "Oh, well, my family's lived here for centuries." Yeah, but where are you really from? You know,
Yeah.
you're like, well, I grew up here. You know, I lived here my whole life. Yeah, but where are you from? Like, it's
Yeah.
You know, there's a good book I recommend to y'all, to you guys. It's called it's by Jennifer De Leon, and it's called "Don't Ask Me Where I'm From," and it's about that idea. I like the answer. You know, I ate it. Right when they ask where your tongue is, or your native tongue. Right. Like you said, right, there's that sassiness, the kind of playfulness, right? I like to see it as too.
It's almost like preemptively answering critics as well. Well, it's probably the next poem more so, I think.
Oh, to the corpse flower?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it.
I don't know if you had.
No. Yep.
No? Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you have. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I think this is, again, I'm always fascinated by how collections are put together. So I do like that transition. You know, Ode to Corpse Flower is kind of his reclamation. Really does kind of remind me of Ji-Hyun Yoon when she's talking about like the food, right? That you know, that one poem, I can't remember the name of the poem, but like I'll eat all the stuff you won't. Like,
yeah,
I'm drawing a hard
there's so many.
blank right now. But I'm so sorry if you're listening.
He's gonna hit you.
Dude, I know. I'm so sorry. I apologize. What? Okay. So, you know, I mean, just this one is very pop culture and historical allusion heavy, which I think is always really cool. In that sense, you know, I do get like, reminds me of like Jose Olivares a little bit.
That's what I was
in those
say.
senses.
Yeah.
You know, for example, there's a line like, I haven't read a book of poems where it says "keep it 100," you know, which is very modern day slang.
Right.
Is this the one where he addresses critics too about like using certain words? Shoot, maybe I'm also blending in my head. Oh no, that's the next language in question. No, but you know, and then so like anything else, he's kind of dismissing like the white culture, right? Fuck Whitman, fuck Pound. Give me Emily D. Speaking of which, I ever told you, Daddy? Only sun gods get me hard. You know, it's that his tone and style. Like this is it. How does Eduardo Corral say it? You know, he tongues words, muscle symbols, and sonic rich lines attuned to public and private dictions. Yeah. His collection is furiously queer, ecstatic, bilingual, sarcastic, you know, and this poem is that right there. This piece.
Yeah, I do love odes, and like you said, you know, more of that playfulness mixed in with a lot of those, you know, modern day illusions, but also a lot of classical ones, right? You know, I like that, you know, La Virgen de Guadalupe with a twist of Santa Muerte. It kind of reminds me of like, you know, it's like the yin yang there, right? And the corpse flower itself, right, is you know, that flower that's fully, right, it smells like a rotting corpse, right, if I'm not mistaken. And so, you know, it is interesting, right, going back to what you said, that word that last time you said, you know, means like something beautiful or something.
Pulchritudinous.
There you go. But in this case, you know, it's taking that an ugly flower, right, or at least ugly in how it smells. I don't know if it actually looks pretty, but you know, turning it into something that is proud of its identity, right?
Yeah, I really want to see him read this one out loud. Like, like just thinking about the way that it's all ramped up to at the end. Let me show you how a chola really leans. Mother Nature may wear floral, but I ain't your mama. I thirst like Betty Boop at Peep Coquette. Marilyn Monroe blowing in an air vent. Say Malinche, say chuva the whore. Give me more. I thrive in shade. My throat is my throne, so queen me, bitch. Like, what?
Yeah.
By the way, now we have to use the Nazi for work tag, the language tag.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In this episode.
Yeah. Man.
It just ramps up to like, I really want to see this read out loud by him.
And it's another anthem poem to me, clearly. Was there something that jumped out at you in this one?
No.
I mean, there's a lot in this one, right? You could take a whole stanza and like one with it for like 20 minutes, you know?
It was a close reading.
Yeah.
Versace Medusa. There you go. What a stage name. Oh, I really like that. Actually, like talking about like, call me Versace Medusa. I like part Lilith, part Calla Lily.
Yeah.
Keep your heteronormative birds and bees. Give me the necrophiliacs, the freaks, the meat-eating beetle and flesh fly. There I go again, allies. Getting all hot and bothered, being vulgar meaning common. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot to unpack in the line. But, even just like that, taking the image, I talked about the imagery before, right? We all know birds and bees become this...
Synecdoche?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I think of, And how like it's like, well, no, I don't keep your birds and bees.
Yeah. And I think, you were saying, Richie, that you wanted to go into the next one too, right? Because there's something about this one that remind you of the next language in question.
Oh, right. Yeah, I didn't mention it. I mean, I didn't necessarily have to go first, though. But I do like how, it continues. Language in question. And there's things I liked here. But, and again, there's that line that Eduardo Corral brings up in his blurb for the book. And, of course, we're going to read his book pretty soon. But I do really like that line, God damn, my mouth has many uses. Eat, sing, bite, kiss, but most of all insinuate. Like, that's deadly. I love it. But of course, what I was referring to is kind of preemptively addressing the critics, right? Who might say some words don't belong in poems. And so he is actively, right, bringing up his language.
Yeah.
Use of language.
And unlike the first language in question, it doesn't have those suchiras, but it's still one stanza. And here it does bring up that, the conceit of the octopus, starting with right where you finish, where it asks, have you ever been sucked by the cups of an octopus's underside, right? I mean, just the that S sound, right? That the sussing, right? And my line to me goes back to the sensuality of this poem. I think that I'm drawn to. Did you have something from this one?
I just really like the one line where it says, "If only they could let themselves relax." Speaking to the critics, towards the bottom, where it says, "Just kidding."
Okay. Taste is what the octopus does on its way down with its tentacles. The language in question is like that. It's a squishy worm-like squirm, can contort and go down the wrong pipe. So obviously there's that sexuality in this these sets of lines. But I do like how it brings it about through the form of the animal, right? The octopus, which it's playing around with, right? And it sexualizes it and makes it, brings it into that language, right? By describing it, right? Going back to what, there's that recurring image, in other words, of the worm.
Oh, yeah.
And
like a warm tongue.
yeah, worm and warm,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and then again, I just love the bluntness of just around where you stopped. We're gonna keep doing that, like, yeah, and just before you stop, right after again addressing, if some words don't belong in poems, then I say some people can go fuck themselves. Just kidding.
And Vanessa, I think you had a line.
Right after where you left off.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
That would be perfect.
No, really though.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where it says, if they could only let themselves relax. So like all of that tied together, kind of like mind your own business is how I took it. Like, don't really worry about it because it's not about you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like you. Kind of had a sassiness too when you said that.
Because that's the feeling that I kind of got from it.
Yeah.
You channeled it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dig it. Wow, the page turns are so loud.
Yeah. What was the next poem y'all had?
Well, the next one, Heroin with an E. That's the next one, right? I mean, it's a heavy one.
Yeah.
And I wish I kind of knew more about the story behind it. Again, lots of imagery.
Yeah.
One of the things I wrote down here is the T.S. Eliot reference. Referencing measuring out life in coffee spoons.
Yeah.
In this case, in cigarettes and coffee spoons.
I marked that line too.
Yeah. And again, you have the return of Caesura.
Right.
It's a heavy one, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Chasing the Dragon a little.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Sorry.
No, what was the next poem, y'all? Yeah, definitely one of those heavy poems, like you said. The epigraph starts with that idea of the hope diamond. You know, many diamonds don't ever get to that point because you just didn't survive all these things that had to have happened. And it ends with that, right? So there's a bookend of sometimes even the diamond was once alive. And diamonds are interesting because, from my understanding, it's just like the carbon that is so condensed together that it becomes this shiny object, right?
Put enough pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people do end up using it as a metaphor for triumphing over
Diamond in the rough.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And then but then like the actual application of like how we get diamonds and like the whole culture built around them says a lot too, right?
Yeah. And I like the title too, right? Heroin with an E. Le Daré Mis Pulmones is, I think, the first poem that is titled in Spanish. And I think, it's kind of a continuation of the last one, right? To me. But here, at the beginning, toward the end, she could only, in the sense that like it's kind of giving homage and honoring a person's life, and I like just the title itself, right? It brings up that idea of sacrifice. But, man, what a great first line, right? Toward the end, she could only lift a cup of coffee. Brings back that T.S. Eliot line and kind of brings it a whole different dimension.
Right, because it's also because of the cigarettes that she's there. Measuring out her life in cigarettes and coffee. But then again, like mentioning how he adds to images, right? Just the idea of even then that became too heavy for her, so he has to like sponge it with like pan dulce.
Yeah. I just love that image.
Birds. I always love good hummingbird imagery and art. That'd be visual art, lyrics, poems.
And the next one, I had reasons for abolishing ICE, but I don't know if either of you had To the Unborn Sibling.
No, I don't.
No. So on page 15 is a poem that repeats that ICE, the word at the end of each line, except for the last one. And you know, I had mentioned this one in the previous episode, so I won't mull over it too much. But you know, we get again the image of a diamond, you know, because it looks like a diamond but is an ice. Because I think we know enough of hate ice. Um, you know, it goes into the actual literal meaning, right? Going back to the first poem about the language in question. And to me, the last line is what jumped out the most. Because if you want papers that won't crush you like book lice dumped into paper, you know, goes back to that request of documentation, right? Which is one of the ways that, of course, you might end up getting deported. And I think, you know, given the political climate, a lot of people have been advocating for abolishing ICE. You know, here, of course, ICE is lowercase, right? So it's not the acronym, but of course it is at the same time. But I think it also would be a good poem to teach within, even if you think about it, like if you're teaching the unit on like Black Lives Matter, you know, right now we have the Derek Chauvin trial going on. And if you're teaching, you know, critical race theory, if you're teaching Chicanic studies as well. So I like, even if you're teaching like some kind of environmental lit, you know, because of the polar ice caps and, you know, we actually haven't, you know, other than Natalia's book, Running, you know, we haven't talked too much about, maybe Grise's book a little bit, but like environmental issues. Yeah. So in other words, I like the versatility in this poem, you know, that it isn't just straight up just ICE as an immigration and customs enforcement, but it intertwines it with all these other things.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the superlatives of this work, that it's able to do that in just one of the poems in multiple times.
Yeah.
It's also inspired by Juan Felipe Herrera's 187 Reasons Why Mexicans Can't Cross the Border.
Interesting.
Which uses that theme of because.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason why I also remember that is because my friend Alessandra published 23 Reasons Why Mexicanos can still be found at a Walmart. And Carlos, too, also has a poem that's inspired by that poem that he has in his book, How to Lie to a Customs Agent.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so, I mean, but again, they're all thematic.
Right.
In that way, so... This is in that tradition as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that Alice poem, by the way. I actually just finished teaching it.
Awesome.
So it's
an automatic inclusion to the syllabus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that Sasha Pimental was the editor that month, and she featured cool peeps in that, you know, including Ale and Aldo Amparan, and
right.
That was cool.
What other ones did y'all have after? I think I had like Conversations with My Father.
I mean, these are all little vignettes. I mean, in Morning Dove, just like a little vignette of this incident of, you know, he's bringing a dead dove to his father, and there's a strong line there that I really like. It's a stray bullet sounds as harmless as a stray dog until that dog has you in its jaws.
Yeah, same.
And and then kind of just the concept of his dad showing him how to defeather it. So I imagine they can like cook it, I guess. But he tells them, this won't be enough. Keep shooting or she will have died for nothing, which I think is an interesting concept.
And I think this is the first poem that does mention the dad. Yeah. You know, and then we get so we get a series of poems about the father in this, if you could call it a section. So it goes to the father's portrait in styrofoam. And, you know, I just really like that image at the end of, I sense there's a scorpion trapped beneath a Dixie cup. But did either of you have the Conversations with My Father? So, you know, this is an interesting form where I think we saw in Yon's collection the last time we saw a work that has this kind of form. but I can't remember. But you know, it's one side of it is conversations with my father. The other is a poem and closet verse. So to me, at the end of it, where it says the question is posed, to the son by the father. When will you be a father like me? Having children doesn't make me a father, at least not to me. I mean, I would like it if you made me a grandfather again, right? The father says, you either are or you aren't. There is no again. I just really love this back and forth in this one, and the conflict between father and son and acceptance. Going back to the mother, right? The mother averting the gaze. Here, the father is, in a way, also averting the gaze.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, structurally, I love that. I mean, so they're already one's left, the other's right. I was gonna say pan left, pan right. I mean, I'm thinking in sound engineer terms right now, but one's flush left and the other's flush right. But his inclusion of the caesura again to emphasize the distance, the separation, is prominent, like a wall.
Yeah.
And also, one is above the other instead of directly side by side. Ode to the Peacock. Did either of you had this one?
Dun, dun, dun. No,
And then we get This Way to the Egress, which begins with a Wikipedia entry. And then Darkest Lashes.
I have that one.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I just like this one because it's like, to me, I understood it as like he's talking about like trauma and like regrets. And so then it's called The Darkest Lashes, which I think is from memory. Memory gives you the darkest lashes because at the end of the poem it says, memory is quick to whip me for what I did and didn't do. So his regrets and his memory are like causing him to still like be suffering for what he did do and what he didn't do.
Yeah. And it's a recurring theme of the trauma of family, right? Going back to both the father and the mother, and here back to the mother. It's funny how we get again the gaze, from the very beginning, but there's a fence in there, right? So a wrought iron fence in her gaze. I slipped through the bars. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of Someone Always Hungry too, because of that emphasis of, at the end of, I am ashamed of eating potatoes and my mother, an ordinary laborer. I didn't know what hunger was then, and, we of course talked a lot about food and memory and, that the impoverishedness, right, of the, Yun's collection, right, in the family. Did either of you had the memory jar? Queso de patas. I think you wanted to talk about this one, Richie, and you too. Go for it.
This one, I think it's interesting because I think it's like the idea of like beat and like migrating and taking that journey. Like the idea of like how bad your feet would smell like, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And how worn out they get too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It talks about like calluses and then bare feet on the cement floor. And then at the end, ungraded as she tread upon this foreign soil, barefoot, an acquired taste that if you smelled and did not eat, you could not understand. So like to people who don't have to put themselves in this situation and try to like migrate and try to find a better life for themselves, like those people wouldn't understand like what this is.
And I like how with the sharing the story of the speaker sharing the story of the mother, how the mother immigrated. It starts with her being Weta, right, and that in itself, we've talked about like, colorism and white privilege. But here it says, though she was never white as snow or milk, her skin tinged amber, like the Mexican cheese that smelled of feet that I refused to eat as a child. So it's really interesting, the what whiteness is. It really shows how whiteness becomes that social construct that we've talked about, and mixes it in, right? There's a kind of synesthesia because, the weta is a color, you see it, but it's also evoking a smell at the same time. And
Oh wait, sorry.
go for it. Sorry.
Before that stanza that I did read, I thought the stanza before, like right before it on the top of that page on 26, was also really interesting, talking about his mother again. Just because it says, the gueran eating air, and when her flesh was tossed into the melting pot, she resisted. Like this idea of like adopting like American culture and trying to like keep her own culture. And then the idea of like the melting pot being America.
Right. Yeah, not assimilating. We've talked about that, right? A lot in the collections, in the works and collections we've seen, and the stories we've talked about. And that's interesting, because the way that the mother, if we are to take this to be the same mother throughout the collection, the mother from the beginning was painted in a bad light, because she wasn't accepting the son, right? But now we kind of might be a little conflicted, right? Because now the mother is someone who is very hardworking. She's a laborer. She's, crossed the desert in a way that really gives us a sense of the sacrifice that she made. And then she assimilated, right? So, I mean, she didn't assimilate. So, even more power to her. So, yeah, I think, it's really complicating for the readers, what we think of as the mother in the collection in question. Well, I think this is the last we'll talk about, for this first half, which is another language in question. And right, it's like to me, it's like a boss level, right, of a game.
Cue music.
When I called you a beluga whale, right? So now we are keeping with aquatic animals, and this time a mammal instead of a cephalopod or whatever. To me, what jumped out about this one is towards the end, where it says, don't forget, it doesn't work like that. You don't get to choose who you fall in love with. But I am trying to be a noble beast, hence the beluga whale. I have been practicing white people speech for years and years. Forgive me. I was always about to understand you. So there's this back and forth between, the speaker and their audience, and their lover. I think it's interesting how the speaker says, when I called you a beluga whale, I meant it as a compliment, because you would think it's like what they call fat shaming, right? Call anyone that, and that's what they'll take it as. So again, through Benjamin's swift use of language, they're able to, turn it into something that they play around with, throughout the poem. And, it's interesting also at the end, the idea of white people's speech, again, that the tongue comes back again.
I also think it's interesting that he says, I've been practicing white people's speech, and previously, and that he's trying to also be a noble beast. He thinks of the beluga whale as being a noble beast. And then also, and towards the middle, he talks about how scientists have actually recorded beluga whales mimicking human speech. And so he's trying to embody all of these different aspects from the beluga whale. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is Richie, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Nah, Vanessa stole my points.
Oh,
Because I'm just kidding. I completely agree with you. And that's what I was gonna bring up and say. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Same
Yeah.
on the same note there.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to what you said, Vanessa, the other thing in that one that is right above where you finished, where you started, is it goes back to what's it called? Forget what the community is called, but like the kind of like the terms that are used in the LGBT community.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because it says, but did you know that they trained their masters and not vice versa? The sub smiles at his dom,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so there's that idea of the dominant and submissive, and it's something that is recurring throughout the collection too. That in some of the other ones, you also saw it, and so I like how there's a lot of that. There's a lot here about that play with language, but also play with human emotion and human love as well, and human relationships.
Wow.
Yeah.
Point.
And then one thing I also just noticed is, so that line that you talked about right before it, where it says, blow hoops of bubbles like smoke rings off a cigar.
Yeah.
If you go back to Le Daría mis pulmones,
Yeah.
he blows the smoke
Yeah.
to his
Oh,
mother.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Nice thread. Nice
Yeah.
catch.
Good one.
Okay, that was all I had to say.
Cool.
You said it all. And with that,
Well, with that, this is roughly the first half. So hope you all stick around for us to break down the second half. And like we always say, pick up a copy at your local bookstore and try to promote the work. Review it online on Goodreads or just if you have a blog. Just to bring these writers out, give them more reach, and spread the word.
amen.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, brought to you by Border Census and Power at the Pass. This episode, we discussed Thrown in the Throat by Benjamin Garcia. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode as we continue this discussion. Follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.